skies are fading like that seeming, almost bleeding down the rain to me. But I can't stand this dream. I lie down in a ditch along the roads that I drive every day. I want to be erased from here. Useless things that swim around and tell my brain, please, won't you forget this life? I talk to myself like a monster, hold my head above the water. I stare at a mirror for days. Till I can see it clear. I wait till I can see this clear. Lie down in a ditch along the roads that I drive every day. I want to be erased. Okay, right. It's my Dave Oshana impersonation. Well, I'm going to start with the wiki thing and see where that goes. That's one of the most interesting things that's happened this week. It's definitely been on my mind, and it feels as though it has there's a lot of subtext to it. So I put the links up there. And Isaac, he said, in the age of censorship, having your Wikipedia page deleted is a mark of prestige. But then again, with Wikipedia's new standing in the eyes of the fact checkers, they could just be cracking the whip with their algorithms. Well, I'm assuming there is a personal dimension to it based on the page about why it was deleted. It seems as though there were individuals involved in making the decision to delete my Wikipedia page, and nonetheless, it had happened very, very quickly. I think it was within 36 hours of it being raised as a problem, which does suggest a larger policy underway. Now, I could speculate endlessly on why the Wikipedia page was deleted. The obvious place to go being Vice of Kings, that it's just come out, it got some attention, and that it is directing negative attention towards groups and individuals who may be unhappy about it. Most obviously, specifically my uncle, who was even quoted in the book as saying nobody's going to read it. Well, he might have been wrong about that. People have been reading it. Possibly he pulled some strings. I don't know. Obviously, that's what I'm saying, that speculation is kind of happens in a vacuum. There isn't really anything to check it against. No road to touch the rubber with, although of course I could try and find out, but I'm not going to. And I mean, part of the reason I'm not going to is I don't really care. And one of the reasons I don't care is that, ironically, perhaps not surprisingly to some of you, it is very validating. It seems like the most unequivocal confirmation I've yet had that I might be doing something right. And of course, as I say, that's very ironic. And there is then to consider the Barbra Streisand effect, that if there are attempts to suppress or censor me, then that will only make me stronger, assuming it doesn't kill me. But even outside of that, just the sense of, okay, so I've been noticed, and there's been some ripple back effect. It's timed quite well, I think, in terms of me feeling ready to let go of a certain drive that has been driving me to get noticed, to have an effect, to challenge the powers that be. Also, those two things aren't synonymous, of course. Been actually trying to curry favor from the powers that be in many ways for many years, but at the same time to challenge them. And the powers that be really being my family, most of whom are dead and gone, ones that count, and the rest, I don't even know if they're really paying attention to what I'm doing or not, nor do I really care in any conscious fashion. But bringing it back to the Wikipedia thing, and my ambivalence, I mean, there's another way in which I feel good about having the Wikipedia page deleted, and that's that it's gone. That the page is gone, although that's quite impractical, and there were practical reasons for that page to exist. In terms of giving me a certain amount of credibility, which might help me to get guests on the podcast and raise awareness about my work. There were other aspects that weren't practical, which was to do with vanity, and I created that Wikipedia page. I can say it now on the record because it's gone, and to some extent I maintained it. I mean, I don't know hardly any other editors of that page, so it was a vanity project. It wasn't, the Wikipedia page for me wasn't the result of me being a notable personality that generated sufficient interest for independent parties to create a Wikipedia page about me. Now, of course, this is going to be true of many Wikipedia pages, including my brother's, for example, was probably created by his PR people. John DeRuta certainly wouldn't exist if there weren't John DeRuta acolytes out there doing it for him, and so on. So the only difference, if any, is that I'm low scale enough that I don't have people like that, minions, to do it for me, so I did it myself. And that was one of the things at the top of the page that never got removed. Neutrality is in question. The person who created this page might be too close to the subject, and so on. Well, yes, as close as one can be. Inside the skin of the subject was I. And so I have felt for many years ambivalent about the existence of that page, not in a sense of guilt or anything like that, but just because well, just because. So anyway, so now it's gone, there's a feeling of, oh, well, okay, so the thing that isn't supposed to be possible is possible. It's erased. The past has been erased. The clock has been set back. I can undo the past and undo that decision which I had doubts about, and go back to zero. And now if someone else creates or restores a Wikipedia page in my name, then it'll be legit. And I think that it's it's quite well timed in terms of a shift in my focus and attention away from self-promotion towards promoting Dave Oshana, one kind of obvious thing, and but also that's congruent with that, away from focusing on the dark underbelly of society and towards focusing on a ray of light that is visible within that darkness. That my relationship, my association with Dave has magnified, intensified, and brought into a much more real and tangible dimension as opposed to the conceptual. So yeah, where that will go, how that will proceed remains to be seen. I'm ambivalent about it. I would have to be ambivalent about it. I don't want to jump the gun. I don't want to make claims that I can't back up later. I don't really know what's going to happen in terms of my own focus, orientation, and output. I just know that I've just finished this trilogy. It's been published. I made it a trilogy after the fact, really. At a certain point, I realized this was a trilogy. So the last book is out, and I don't actually have any other books on the go. Not really. I mean, I could split some hairs there. I've definitely got some unfinished works, but I don't have one that's really pulling my attention into it. The Hollywood psychological operatives in Hollywood thing. That series finished at the blog. I mean, I have some unfinished notes there, but I don't feel pulled back to them either. I don't feel that that's going to be a book. So yeah, for the first time in quite some time, I feel like I have a clean, an open road, and that does coincide with I can't say decision because there's been many decisions along the way, but just a growing commitment to supporting Dave Oshana with what he's doing and being more public about it or less coy about it. And one of the things I said in my blog post was that, well, time's running out, so at a certain point it becomes more risky to be cautious than to be reckless, to risk being reckless. Now, what do I mean by that? Not the time running out bit, I think that speaks for itself, but what do I mean by being reckless? What am I concerned about there? The answer is that I'm concerned about fixing something into words and concepts and convictions and beliefs that doesn't need to be. And there's a twofold concern there. One is a kind of age-old one, which I'm trying to overcome now, which is the concern about ending up with egg on my face, about backing a horse that turns out to be backed by the mafia kind of thing again. And yes, and just I mean, that's worse than just egg on the face. Like when I supported John DeRuta and brought people to him, yes, it was embarrassing to discover that he was not a benevolent presence that I thought he was, but it was also more than embarrassing. It was, I mean, I was accountable for that. Same with Homo sapiens, my Aeolus Cephas work, promoting Strieber, Castaneda, and so on, Crowley. There's an accountability there. It's not about being embarrassed. It's about being accountable. And so yeah, there is a genuine basis for that caution. But at a certain point, I guess one has to put down one's chips. The race is about to start. You've got to bet on one horse, so let's just put our mouths where the money's going to go, really. And I do have all my money on Dave Oshana in a certain sense, kind of literal, actually. All my disposable income goes to Dave Oshana retreats, which isn't very much, but currently, I mean, that's my only reason to try and make more money, besides retirement fund, is so that I can continue to participate in Dave's project. So there's a literal aspect to that. But anyway, coming back to my unfinished point about the caution and the concern about being reckless, it's not only this, it's not only the danger of getting it wrong and being accountable, it's also the risk of shutting down a space prematurely by thinking that I've understood it. I mean, just because, it's not just that I don't know that I can 100% trust Dave Oshana and what he's doing as a human being. Well, I know that I can't, because I can't. I mean, mentally, I can't take that leap because it would be dishonest of me. I don't know. He's a fallible human being, just like anyone else in that regard. But that's not necessarily relevant. What is relevant was the point I was trying to get to, that, what was it? The hell was it? Why are there only 7 people out there? I guess I've been away too long. It's been a month, and it's 9 as soon as I said that. And 8. 10. Oh my God. Let's keep counting the numbers. 10's a good number. That's how many there were on the retreat this year, including Dave. I do want to finish the point. I just wanted to cover paper over the cracks there as well as I could. And also remember that this isn't about the English language, the spoken language, the verbiosity. It's about the original language and my own capacity to enjoy being here in my body and to share that experience of enjoyment and well-being with y'all. Dave says use for some reason when he does plural. I guess that's the Cockney version. I don't know why I ended up with a Texan version of y'all, but somehow I did. And so original language, yes, well, that does actually rescue me a bit, because that was what I was getting to, is that if I think that I've understood what Dave is doing in such a way that I can articulate it, then I'm wrong, because that would contradict what I think I understand about what Dave is doing, is that it cannot be articulated. It cannot be verbalized or languified. And that's the essence of its value. So, what a conundrum. Well, the thing about all. Whenever we speak, we lie. I'm lying now. And as far as the forensic fortunes of millions of lost souls riding their way into citizenship of unknown dimensions will always lead to a kind of lost cause that we might spend years contemplating the internal configuration of our mother's wardrobe and have no idea what the hell he's talking about now. Point being there that actually, if you think that you're getting what you're getting by listening to my words and following the meaning, then you're wrong. And I'm wrong if I think I'm doing that. So I ought to really be able to swing the lights around upside down in every which way and share my internal underwear in 45 different flavors, and you wouldn't really notice, because it wouldn't really matter. You'd be grooving to the transmission, man. And this is what I've been trying to explore and express with other participants in Dave Oshana. I think there's no point in trying to promote the guy if that's separate from embodying the thing that we've experienced in proximity to or participation with the guy, to embody and exemplify what I see in Dave to the utmost of my capacity, so that you'll think, well, that's kind of interesting. I kind of want to experience more of that. And then say, well, you like the finger, check out the moon, or something like that. I don't know. But, if you think this is good, well, I know an even better source, the pure uncut substance, man. That's obviously a very bad and irresponsible analogy. Yes. But anyway, it happened. I come from a family of self-destructive drug abusers. What can I do? So yeah, I was going to get to something. But of course now, I don't know what it was. Because there were several things. Being the bridge. Okay, so oh, I know what it was. Thank you, mind, for not deserting me in this time of need. And I'm not supposed to talk about the retreat, what happens on the retreat, unless it's directly about me, but I think I can say some of the things that Dave has said, because they're meaningful even out of context. And one of the things that Dave said on the very first night of the retreat, and I'm going to paraphrase, was that all that's happening here, and the only thing that really means anything, any question that has any importance, is how far has consciousness reached in our bodies? To what degree has consciousness managed to make it into our bodies? That's it. That's the only measure of anything as human beings. And it was very good for me to hear that, because I feel I've internalized that understanding of Dave, and his testimony or his expression of enlightenment for myself. And so I've been communicating that in my different ways, but to have it summed up so succinctly like that, and more succinctly than I was able to do it actually in just a line, was very, very useful. And one point being here is that this is quantifiable, even though we do not have the means, the tools to quantify it, which of course makes it non-quantifiable. It's rather theoretical rather than practical, but there is a level at which we are able to quantify the quality of the transmission. Now, this is about quality, not quantity, so I may end up eating my own tail here as language for you, but there is we could say that there is a measurable, well, it's not measurable, but an objective percentage within, for each of us, that consciousness has made it into our bodies. And the optimal state, of course, is for consciousness to be 100% landed in the body, to have made it all the way into every last cell of the body, for the body to be fully conscious, and for consciousness to be fully embodied. That would be 100% living. And that I choose to think, or I'm going to choose to say now anyway, is what Dave means by enlightenment. 100%. Consciousness being 100% landed in the body. Actually, I could be wrong about that. There could be a certain tipping point at which, once there's enough consciousness in the body, then enlightenment happens, and then there's still more embodying to happen. I don't know. But let's just say there is a percentage point, whether it's 100 or whatever else it is, and we'll call it 100 because it's the tipping point, at which the false identity is absorbed into the body, that consciousness is able to dissolve it in its thawing and cleansing and acidically dissolving fluids, a bit like Jed McKenna's spiritual autolysis, self-digestion, that the false identity, the false self, the trauma-generated self, that prevents us from living, that prevents us, the soul, from being fully embodied, can eventually be digested by the body, broken down into its constituents, absorbed and shat out. And congruent with that, we become, the consciousness is fully embedded in the body. Now, Shakespeare said comparisons are odious, but they're also somewhat unavoidable, I think. And so I do find myself making a comparison between the experiences that I'm able to have more and more in life, and partly, if not largely, as a result of my ongoing relationship and association with Dave Oshana. Of course, first of all, I can compare them with the past, how I wasn't able to experience my body and consciousness previously. But then there's a irresistible temptation to compare to what I imagine Dave Oshana is experiencing, and it's not gratuitous, because the more time I spend with Dave, the more I'm able to access within myself similar potential, the more whole I become. However this happens, there's many different aspects to it, the transmission being the main one, which is something that's transcendental. And along with that, therefore, the more I can check what Dave's saying, there's a kind of positive feedback loop, because the more I can really tune into and receive what Dave is transmitting, which isn't in the words, but the words are often congruent with it, though not always, the more I'm able to embody this potential within myself, the experience of the formless. But also at the same time, the more thereby I'm able to verify Dave's words, because I'm checking them against my own experience. Now, a cynical person could say it's self-hypnosis or hypnosis and so on and so forth, but we don't have to go there. You can if you want. But again, the only testimony is the testifier, like the medium is what verifies the message. Now, people who have known me personally have seen this for themselves up close. Those of you who haven't known me personally but have followed my activities for some time have noticed changes, some of you. And that's all you have to go on, really. I'm happier, I'm more at peace, I'm more fulfilled, I'm kinder, more compassionate, bit wary about putting virtue on there, but people have said that. Warmer anyway, friendlier, more open, and so on. So there's a lot of levels that are just observable in the personal realm. My own testimony only I can know about, but this is what I'm sharing now. And so based on that, it's possible and it kind of inevitable for me to recognize, or believe anyway, that what I'm experiencing is just a fraction of what Dave is experiencing, because I can hear the words he's talking about, and I can even tune into where he's speaking from, and I can experience a lesser version of it. But in terms of the specifics he's describing of his experience, they still seem very foreign to me, as in, he will talk about how he has 24/7 entertainment because he can just observe what's going on in his body. There's the changes in the heart rate, the changes in the pores of the skin on the soles of his feet, with every breath he takes. I mean, he will go into great detail about how he's experiencing his body, and it's very convincing. I mean, it doesn't seem to be just making it up. And it also seems possible. I mean, as I say, the small fraction of it that I began to experience myself indicates to me that this is just the thin end of a wedge. Just checking on the quotes there. I was going to say, well, I'll just read them first. Michael Jones, Wikipedia, just changed to say he died. Did he die? Culture critic John Deere had a big part of his Wikipedia page. Okay. Yeah, I was just to say as a side point, a practical point, I'm not sure if I'm going to do the after thing today because I've been ill, so I'm still recovering. I might, but I might not. So people don't rely on that. If you want to participate and ask questions and stuff, do it now. The questions, however, I will ask that they either refer to the latest blog post, latest podcast, or that's a bit of a digression, it was just up to date, or what I'm saying in the present. Well, I mean, on this particular meet. So keep them on message. So it was a True Detective comment where it was just a piss take. But anyway, I won't be talking about True Detective because that's not. Obviously, I don't want to get pulled off in too many directions. Okay, so seems like there's a private conversation going in the comment section there, which is okay with me. So, okay. Change of orientation. What's being erased about? Like I chose that title and then the song, the intro song, just because of the Wikipedia thing, because of the significance of it, but also the metaphorical meaning of it. Right? Being erased is kind of an old idea, spiritual circles, even in Castaneda, erasing personal history. It's exactly what happened with the Wikipedia thing going down. And yes, it's become a trope, and once again, words are deceptive, and I think that there's something about the nature of words, because they're the currency of the false self and of the defense system, the self-protective system generated by trauma, because we've been mind controlled, that as soon as we start to use words, they themselves have a kind of volition or an orientation which is away from the truth, away from reality, away from the body and the soul. And my right eye just started twitching. And so then what happens is we end up with this counterfeit. Everything gets counterfeited by words. And that's one of the things I've been mapping throughout my work is the counterfeit. Look at the counterfeit. It's so convincing. Even I was convinced. Not even I, but I mean, whatever. Here's an example of how convincing it is, because, I can use logic very well and I can go pretty deep. And yeah, that didn't protect me. That was not a sufficient prophylactic to avoid the STTs of Whitley Strieber or Carlos Castaneda or Aleister Crowley or John DeRuta or so on. Terence McKenna, Robert Allen Wilson, all of these guys who are using words, who are being used by words, being colonized by the virus, including William Burroughs, as carriers of that virus. And as a writer, of course, I have to factor in that my accountability and responsibility there. And yet, the weird thing about the counterfeit, as I've said before, is it does give you the shape of the truth. The lie indicates the shape of the truth, because if it didn't, it wouldn't be a counterfeit. So what's pernicious about the counterfeit is that it's actually hollow. It doesn't have any transmission in it, but the shell or the shape or the structure or the meaning that it's communicating through language may be 100% correct. It's just that it's empty. kind of like the clothes make the man, like my brother and his dandy outfit, or the invisible man, which is a metaphor David's used. Like if you cover a human body with all the accoutrements of clothing, it will show you the shape of the human body. But on the other hand, you could remove the man completely if the clothing was, sufficient, elaborately constructed enough, and it would just be hanging, on an effigy, and you wouldn't ever know it. You'd have an automaton. You'd have the transhumanist B-man. I just realized that B-man could also read B-man, like B-movie. And so bring it back to this thing about being erased, which actually that's very timely, isn't it? Because this would be the counterfeit of the erasing the human being, when you just replace him with the externals and you erase the internal life. That's the counterfeit for the true enlightenment, or the true embodiment, which is when the false identity and the narrativized self that creates an image of itself and then identifies with that image, a simulacrum. When that is dissolved, when that is erased, when that is digested and shat out, then there is an internal emptiness which is filled by life itself. And there are countless ways in which this has been described and prescribed and broken down, and deconstructed and interpreted and sold and packaged and marketed and branded and advertised as the real deal. Spiritual erasure, enlightenment, freedom, etc. And it's all just been dancing clown, the dandy in his top hat. It hasn't been an expression of the thing that is being expressed. And the imitations are legion. So, of course, the last thing I want to end up is as an imitation, and this is a spectrum. This isn't an either-or thing. Like in any given moment, I can fall back on language as the shell, and lose touch with the original language of the soul that's generating the words in the first place, and then I become a sham. I become the counterfeit. I am inauthentic. And well, one of the reasons I think that I moved to draw people's attention to Dave is that I consider him to be a more reliable expression of the truth that I'm struggling to fully embody than I am. So it seems like the honest thing to do, really. It's like, well, okay, yes, I'm trying here, and I appreciate your support, and I'm having a good time, like the Queen song goes, "Don't stop me now," which came up on the retreat, and all of those things. But there's a lot of wrinkles to be ironed out, and in the meantime, there's somebody who's really helping me to iron those wrinkles out, who, as far as I can see, doesn't really have any wrinkles of this particular kind. Now, I want to be specific about that. What is it about David Oshana that I so much admire and consider really worth emulating, if that isn't a trap in itself? Because I'm not sure one can really emulate an external figure without it going horribly wrong. But But on the other hand, a role model is somebody that shows us our own potential and then gives us the opportunity to reorient ourselves to that potential and fulfill it, tap into that potential. And that seems to be what has been happening with Dave. There's a constant reorienting myself away from him to my own potential, but there's still a refer back to the model of the potential that I myself can only see in myself as I'm expressing it. I can't see the unexpressed potential I have because it's not expressed. And so what it is about Dave specifically, and this is not a thing that many people I think would associate with enlightenment, it's his absolute ease and comfort with any situation, and his seeming ability to be himself at all times, bar none. Now, okay, I haven't seen him in a war, but actually high pressure situations, they say, are much easier to, really excel or really let one's instincts and one's authentic responses kick in because one needs to. But so that isn't necessarily the best gauge. And I've certainly interacted with Dave in a vast spectrum of different levels of circumstances. And so currently, for those who don't know, at my instigation, I take the credit and the blame if it comes to that. Dave is doing a free event on April 6th, 2019. It's the day before my birthday. It was just a coincidence. And obviously everyone's invited, and his limit is 100 people on Zoom, and he says up to 60% already, so that's 60 people. So that's already way more than I've ever been on any Dave event I've known about. And I was thinking about, if that were me, and he was inviting his people to an attend event I was giving, and he himself was going to come, I'd be pretty nervous. I would feel a lot of pressure. I might even cave in. Might not be able to handle that much pressure. So it'll be interesting to see, will it be the Dave I know, or will he be, will he show signs of pressure? Because I was saying to Gib on our last conversation on Thursday that in my interactions with Dave, I've never seen him show strain from external pressure. Or at least, I shouldn't say never. I saw him wince once when a baby cried because it'd been crying and making a lot of noise, and it was really getting grating, and then I saw him wince. And I said, I saw you wince there. And he said, yeah, I thought I'd let that show to make people, feel, I suppose, I don't remember what he said, but it was something like, let it show so that other people would feel it less. Because I was definitely feeling like wincing in that baby, and I probably was wincing. I don't know, maybe he was just dissembling and pretending that he'd consciously let it show. But again, I got the feeling he was being honest, that he'd made a micro decision that I'm going to let the strange show here. And I mean, I've certainly done things like that. Side point, main point being the pressure that I have observed, if that's not too strong a word, that Dave is responding to is not a social pressure. It's a different kind of pressure. And I think I know, again, from experience, what that is. Like when I do these things, when I'm doing this now, because I'm not enlightened, there is an element of social pressure, like, I've got to get it right, I'm losing it a bit here, I'm being seen, I'm being exposed, I'm going to lose faith, all that stuff that is not entirely negligible. It's there in my consciousness, but there's a different sort of pressure, and it's a pleasant pressure. Although I can imagine that it could get so intense that it wasn't pleasant, which is to deliver something. Like taking a shit is the first example that comes to mind. Dave and I have that in common. We have a lot in common, actually. You might be surprised how much. I certainly have been. Even talking heads and taxi driver things, trivial things of that nature. Taking a shit, it was the first thing that came to mind. Like it's really great to take a shit, but if you wait too long, so I really am stealing Dave's material now because he's used exactly the same analogy, but I think he pulled it out of my psyche, and so I'm just taking it back now. It's a universal experience, perhaps. If you wait too long, the shit will not. First of all, it's going to be very unpleasant. Running around trying to find a toilet with the shitload trying to escape. That's not a good experience. But then when you do actually get there, it's not the same shit it would have been if you'd got there in the right moment, exact moment. And this is something I've been practicing lately. Again, I did teach it on one of my first liminalist events. I think it was the first, which is taking a shit without using muscle power. Just sit and wait, and the shit will find its way out, and it will get where it needs to get. And it's a very, Martin J, I don't know if he's here today, has suggested that I or we will most likely get enlightened while taking a shit, with the proviso that we will have to eat the right food on that particular day or the day before. It'll have to be the right constituted feces. But anyway, there is something about that experience of letting go, letting life itself take over. In this case, it's sort of death, isn't it? But life and death like this. Where was I going with that? Oh, the pressure. So, yes, I have a pressure to deliver something. Hopefully it isn't a big turd, although that can happen. And it can even be, if it's the right time and place. Metaphorically, I mean, of course it can happen. Obviously, literally it happens every day. But if it's a metaphorical turd in the right time and place, then it can be fertilizer, and it can actually be useful. Even shit can have its uses. And something of that kind did happen on the retreat. I felt a pressure, and it came out, and it was a bit stinky. But, well, I mean, that's one way to test how safe you are and how comfortable and how uninhibited you are with your people, is you can take a big shit in front of them and nobody, turns up their lip at you. Well, maybe a little bit of lip turning, but nobody casts you out as a stinky shit maker. So I feel like I didn't quite finish that. Because of the vivid imagery, I got captured by it. I didn't quite finish it. The pressure. Well, so here we're getting into a place where language becomes a verifiable mess of constitutional contradictions that make me want to perm my hair and share all of my wildest nightmares with you, as in stop making sense. Now, actually, on the retreat, Dave used the phrase start making sense quite a few times. I don't know if it was a conscious homage to the Talking Heads album and tour and movie, or not, but it did occur to me that yes, we've gone through the stop making sense phase of culture with postmodernism, and now it is time to start making sense. But how can we start making sense? The only way we can start making sense is by letting go of the belief that words themselves make sense, that they're anything besides noises made by the human organism that happen to have corresponding letters and words on pages and computer screens. that have gone on to create a whole surrogate reality that is in its final stages, in which we have come to believe, some of us, that reality itself is computer code and that the human soul can be written in code, or translated or copied as code. The delusion holds sway. Now, what was I saying was just the only sense that is going to rescue us from that, the nonsense of false sense, is this deeper pressure within us that is always there within us, of life itself, to express and articulate through the act of living. And when all is said and done, that's all that's happening anywhere anyway. Like, it only seems that we're starting a sentence with the subject I, and then the verb and the noun and so on, and we've got to get to the full stop and then start the next sentence until eventually we end up with a novel, and then we can get a publication deal, and then we can get interviewed on talk shows and eventually make it to Oprah and be the Jordan B. Peterson of 2019. Yeah, that's not the way things go. They might appear to go that way on the world stage, but life is just a stage. I mean, the world is but a stage. Life itself is not confined to the worldly structures. And I think this is maybe going to get me to one of the points on my list of notes. I was just checking the comments. Which was to do with what was it? What did I just say? Anyone? Oh, I'm almost there. I was talking about books. See, now it's like when you get to the toilet and you really thought you were ready to take a shit, but turns out you're not. So then you just have to decide: do I wait? Shit, I'll get off the pot. Do I wait, or do I get up, carry on, and then just stay close enough to the toilet so I can make it back in time? And that's always a tough decision, because we're always on the go, always got things to do. And if we're doing a YouTube presentation, we don't want lots of dead air. I will actually look at my notes, because I'm pretty sure they will remind me. Oh gosh, there's more things that I didn't get to. Bridge. I thought it was going to remind me. Well, there was something I was going to talk about, and I thought that is related, and it's perhaps a specific example of this, of the danger of words, and the power of words. It's also in the danger of them is in the power of them. And but now I'm not sure if I should talk about it. See, here's a lived example. Two kinds of pressure. And if we give in to the one kind, which is the social pressure and the pressure of language that says, hey, this is a good, interesting idea, you should share it, then we're not going to be responsive to the deeper pressure, which is whatever it is we really have to express, which may or may not coincide with the ideas, the mental stuff. On the other hand, if we stay in the flow, we just talk about anything at all, or nothing at all. But what I have currently is the feeling of unfinishedness, which is okay, because it's 25 minutes. If I keep this to 1 hour 20, there's an unfinished nature to this package. Like, I haven't delivered the whole thing. I haven't taken the full dump. So, okay, so I'll go here and we'll see if it gets me back there. As I said earlier, I don't have any books on the go. Nothing, there's no pressure, there's no internal pressure there. Sort of internal, external when it comes to a book, because I feel like I'm getting all these kind of information and ideas coming at me from the outside as well. Like, oh, I've got to write about this. But I'd say there's neither in that regard. And so one of the ideas I've had for several years now, it won't surprise any of you, is to work on a book with Dave Oshana about what really matters, what's beyond the social and what's beyond the worldly. I think that was the point I was going to get to, was the worldliness. Yeah, it was. To is right, the promotion and self-promotion. Like, I've been promoting myself, and promotion is all about worldly stuff, because I felt that what I had was of value, but also because I needed to be validated. So those two things get all tangled up. Now, if and as I shift my energies to helping to promote Dave, that feels very different to me, not just because it's not about me, it's about somebody else, but because I don't really see any way that Dave could be a worldly sort of figure. Like, it was easy for me to imagine for myself, and it still is to some extent, how I could convincingly present myself to the world in such a way, like Jordan Peterson, the man of the hour, or man of yesterday hour, as an important cultural commentator and so on and so forth. Significant, relevant, all that stuff. Very, very hard to see Dave that way. Very, very hard to even talk about Dave and make it relevant, because it's so ephemeral. We're talking about the formless here. The formless, by definition, is like the eternal. It's both the most relevant thing and the most irrelevant, because it renders all of our context and our criteria for what is relevant, what is meaningful, meaningless. So that's, of course, what makes it the thing of most value, but it also makes it doesn't fit with the framework. So how do you introduce it? How do you introduce something into a framework when by introducing it you will dissolve the internal structures of that framework? If you're effective, you'll bring about the end of consensus reality as you know it, in the old terms that I used to think of myself as an apocalyptic agent. But all of that was the counterfeit. That was a streamlined kind of idea, of a deliverer of profound truth and so on, that would be raised up by it. Of course, actually, traditionally and historically, those who deliver profound truths to the world are not thanked for it. They're not rewarded. They're not raised to high status. They are crucified, one way or another, or they're erased from the record. Hence how validating it is to me to be erased from Wikipedia. Finally, I've been recognized as meaningful. Therefore, I've had to be erased from the public record. Now, so yeah, that was what I was getting to about the pressure that Dave is responding to is not a worldly pressure. It is not of this world. That's my belief. And I believe that based on an 11-year association with him, but also based on my own growing sense of that within my own life, that there is something that is moving us, not driving, because it's not forceful, it's not relentless in that way, it's gentle. It's like the Parakliti, the comforter. It's moving us into life, into incarnational life, in a way that allows for an experience of the formless and of the eternal and of the infinite, because that is what is moving us into life. It is the formless itself that is moving into form, as in whatever, no one can ever know why it would do that, but it does. But that's all there is. That's all that's happening. All that needs to happen, all that we could ever want to happen, is for us to have an experience of the formless experiencing form, to experience ourselves as the form which formlessness has given rise to, and thereby experience ourselves as the formless. Now, that's clearly not a worldly endeavor. It's not going to find much traction within the world. The only place it's going to find traction is among human souls, between human souls, one-to-one, the Tao that cannot be named. And it is love, but also the love that cannot be named. That has unfortunate connotations, doesn't it? There you go, more counterfeits. So anyway, here's my proposition. Might as well end on a proposition. I haven't made it to Dave yet, but it's that, well, here's the context for it. It's that there are apparently quite a lot of people, I mean, not a lot, 17 today, but, a couple of hundred or something like that, maybe more, maybe 1,000 even, who are drawn to what I do, and they find meaning and value in it. And most, but not all, of those people, but I'd say most of them, are not especially drawn to Dave Oshana, which means that, but they have been introduced to him by me to one degree or another. So that means that they're more interested in me, and they find more value in what I do than currently they've found in what Dave is doing. Now, of course, that's very interesting to me, not just to my ego as reassurance, but it's a bit of a puzzle, really, because, well, is that just that they're wrong and they just don't see how great Dave is, and I'm tricking them into thinking I'm really great when I'm not, and so on and so forth? Or is it that that I am offering something that Dave isn't offering? Well, that's clearly true, but maybe something that Dave actually can't offer. And if so, is that inseparable from Dave's enlightenment? Are there drawbacks to being enlightened? Now, socially speaking, it seems clear that that might be true. There might be some drawbacks, socially speaking, to getting enlightened. But without going into all of that, let's flip that over and say, well, okay, that means that there are some pros to being unenlightened. And I don't just mean the pros that I can watch Netflix as much as I want and indulge in fantasies of being a somebody and all that stuff in the way that perhaps Dave can't. He can probably watch Netflix, but what I mean is the pros of being unenlightened, in that I have access to a kind of experience that, although illusory, is much more universal than enlightenment. Well, it's much more common anyway. Maybe universal isn't quite the right word for it. Anyway, it might be being a bit long-winded here, but the conclusion that I reached is that language again. There seems to be the potential there for me to be a bridge between y'all, bunch of people who are interested in what I'm doing, and Dave, and that Dave himself, as I've testified in this last blog post, is a bridge to the infinite. My God, I just said it. I went on record. He might not be. I could be wrong there. But what if I'm right? Holy shit. As an example, well, it's reckless to say that because I could be wrong. And it could generate all kinds of illusions and delusions and be very counterproductive for Dave and everyone else. But what if I'm right? What if it's true? Then not saying it is risky too. So let's just put a question mark about at the end of that. You know, if I'm right and I've interpreted Dave's testimony or his sharing about what he has experienced and attained more or less, 90% correctly, then he's in a very different place to me and to anyone else I know, and could be anyone else on the planet. Who knows? How common this is, but it's certainly uncommon. We know there's lots of people claiming it, and we know that most of them are full of it. So let's say that 1 out of 100 claimants to enlightenment, or the equivalent thereof, is genuine. Then, well, maybe there's 50 or something, and then the ones who aren't claiming it, but they're sort of irrelevant because we're not going to encounter them. Well, I suppose we might, if we're lucky. That would be the best case scenario, wouldn't it? I would think that it's actually more common for somebody to have attained this lived connection to the eternal and the formless, and not be acting like a spiritual teacher, than it is the other. So I think Dave is probably most rare because I think he's actually for real, but he's acting like he's not for real because he's doing the spiritual teacher gig. Like you said, being a guru could never not be a parody for him, and there's no hope for him in that regard. I like that he said that. It's very succinct again. It's all a hoax, but that's only if it's true. And it's a true hoax. It's a finger that is truly pointing to the moon, that is truly reflecting the sun, which is your solar being. And there is nothing else in this life to want than to experience our true, authentic soul, our being. That's it. It's the whole game. Right there. One game ends, another game begins. So yeah, I didn't get to my proposition. Occurred to me, like, if I was going to write a book with or about Dave Oshana, and what the obvious take is, well, this is the age of enlightenment. This is a guy, me, on the threshold of enlightenment, kind of looking over at somebody who's enlightened and going, what's it like over there? What's going on? What's the weather like? What do you see? What do I look like from over there? Should I step over the threshold? And if so, why? And if not, why not? And can you give me a hand, or do I have to do it on my own? Or, what's the deal here? How can we even have this conversation if you are what you say you are? And what's the nature of this conversation? What's the optimal thrust for this conversation? And this, I think, is the optimal thrust. Not conversation with God, conversation with Dave. You tell me, and I'll tell you. You tell me what it's like on that side, I'll tell you what it's like on this side. We'll see, exactly where the threshold is and what it consists of, and what stepping over it entails, and how you ended up. How did you get over it? And why am I on this side? And part of the why I'm on this side, it seems to me, maybe this is a rationalization, is so that I can communicate from this side to the other people who are still on this side in a way that they will understand and they will experience themselves as being personally seen. Because once you are enlightened, that's you, you may not be able to see people in the way that you see them currently. And if you are in the presence of somebody who is enlightened, you may discover that they cannot see you as other people see you, and even as you might want to be seen. They might not see you as a person at all. They may not validate that part of you that really needs to be validated enough that you can finally let it die in peace. So I think that's part of the reason people are drawn to me and what I do, who aren't drawn to Dave. And what I do is I provide a certain kind of validation and reassurance and, yes, comfort that they won't get from Dave. Dave is what I have called a formless warrior. And there is something very unnerving about that, being in the presence of that. And I realized in the shower this morning, and this is the point I didn't know if I was going to get to because I felt it was too risky, that this phrase "formless warrior" comes from Carlos Castaneda, so it's a loaded phrase that I use with great trepidation, but I still use it. And I shared it with Dave on the podcast that didn't happen, that wasn't recorded, and he seemed to accept it. He didn't say anything, but I could tell from his body language that he wasn't rejecting it, at least. And then I remembered in the shower this morning that when I first met Dave, well, third time I met him, the first time was these two events that were free, such as one on April 6th. Please don't forget, book now if you want to participate, because slots are getting filled. The third meeting within the same week, 2007, was at his instigation. A chap called Jay, who I just heard from by email, who was organizing for him, invited me, gave me the time and the place to meet Dave in a hotel lobby. Presumably he was giving a one-to-one to somebody in that hotel. On an evening, I bicycled to Edgware Road. Pretty sure I went in my black suit even. My God, this was it was post the one, but I still had some residual fantasy around that. Anyway, we sat for several hours in that lobby talking about stuff, and I did most of the talking, much to my chagrin. And one of the things I said to him was, I don't think you're enlightened. I think maybe you've lost the human form, referring to Castaneda and what being a formless warrior is, one who has lost the human form. It reminds me, I was going to look it up online and see how Castaneda defined it. Perhaps just a good thing that I didn't. I'm not going all the way into that. I'm going to do it afterwards, and you can do it if you're curious. Castaneda is not a trustworthy source. I emphasize this. But again, that doesn't mean that the words in those books aren't all inherently accurate, not literally historically dates and all that. We know that there was a lot of fudging going on, but the metaphysical model that he's talking about, well, I hope to God it isn't all, because there's some really horrible stuff in there, but that's not a good reason to reject it. There's a body of knowledge in the Castaneda books which I still suspect is largely true, if badly distorted and misrepresented by a damaged psyche. And therefore, toxic in and of itself. So then even one part of it's going to be carrying this plutonium. So yes, I'm very wary about reintroducing these old toxic concepts. But I have to acknowledge that's a pretty surprising realization for me, that I've come full circle. Not that I don't think Dave's enlightened now, but that I now am considering the possibility that he may be a formless warrior, and that losing the human form was what happened to him that morning that he calls Enlightenment Day, as in the thing that Castaneda writes about there. Anyway, and losing the human form has to do with, well, the erasure of the personal self, constructed identity, I believe, and but it's an energetic thing. So the consciousness indwelling the body no longer identifies with being a person. Now, I'm really want to be careful here, because I could say with being human, or with human beings, or with humanity, but I know that this is a very dangerous road to go down. And yet, if we begin to experience ourselves as formlessness, as an aspect or an expression of the formless that is eternal, it does seem quite likely that humanness or humanity would not be sufficient to contain or define or represent that experience, that we would, in a certain sense, have transcended our humanness. In a certain sense, would still be in a body, and the body would still be the image of God and the incarnation of logos in the theological model of Christianity, which I guess I had to get to sooner or later because I always end up there, don't I? And I do believe there's the most profound value and meaning in those particular words, the gospel, maybe the Tao Te Ching. But there's something more specific about Christianity. So, formless warrior. There's something about Dave where it's almost like he has to pretend to be something he's not, just in order to reach us, me, the people that he works with. Now I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to say more than that, and just bring it back to I'm not pretending to be an ordinary human being. I'm not pretending to be not enlightened or to know what it's like to really be trapped in the mind and the identity, and just to feel that there's no hope. And I'm not just bursting with joy in every moment and trying not to laugh when I hear about people's suffering and travails, which is what Dave said it was like when he first got enlightened. He couldn't understand that people weren't joking when they talked about all their suffering to him, because he could see that some part of them was not identified with that, didn't believe in any of that, right? I'm not in that place. And I think that many of you respond to that. You respond to the capacity of one human soul, psyche, consciousness, me, to span quite a wide spectrum between not just contemplating, but articulating, expressing, even experiencing and embodying, borderline eternal truths, the threshold, and the most ordinary human fallibility that any man has ever publicly displayed. Well, I'm exaggerating, of course, but those of you who think I'm really exaggerating, you need to read Seen and Not Seen and perhaps some other stuff to see that I'm not exaggerating that much. I'm pretty out there with my flaws. And I think my flaws, well, I don't know if they're more profound than most people's, or if I'm just more honest. That's the problem, isn't it? People don't talk about how fucked up they are. The assumption is, well, I must be more fucked up than other people because I'm the only one talking about it. But I do think that my damage is pretty profound, and that the symptoms and the pathologies that I've had to explore and eventually resolve are perhaps unusually deep and dark. And I think that does make me not the perfect, but a useful potential bridge between the world of endarkment and the world of enlightenment, between the oppressive configurations of forms that have coagulated into a tapestry, a matrix like web and snare of organized malevolence, and the eternal beauty, peace, rest, and well-being of the formless life eternal, life everlasting. I aspire to be that ratio, not in some neo-Gnostic I am the one way. We all can aspire to that. We all probably should aspire to that, because there's nothing else to do here except be the one, be the ratio. But I'm a bit of a canary in the coal mine for some reason, and so you get to see me choke. Oh, just kidding. Get to see me survive all the way through to, through the dark, dingy depths. I'm hearing the Johnny Cash song now, Down in the Coal Mine. to and out the other end, where the light is infinite, eternal, and everlasting. You get to follow that progress, and if audacious, willing, bold, daring, capable enough, align, become parallel lines, moving in tandem out of the darkness and into the light. And that's my proposition. I ended it on a bang, didn't I? Not just a book. It's an experience. Okay, so not only human. Does Dave address this? Okay, well, I'm going to say we'll go over to Zoom then, because I feel okay. I don't want to leave everyone hanging. Just maybe for a short time. It's often gone on quite long on Zoom, and I really don't want to go on very long, so I want to conserve my energy. But I'm going to go over to Zoom in about 5 minutes. I'll post the link, and maybe we do an hour on Zoom. We'll really try and keep it to an hour. That's if people show up. If there's less than 3-4 people, then maybe I just won't do it. But thanks everyone for being here. I've had a good time. I hope you have too. I guess I won't plug myself because I guess I'm reorienting, but I will plug Dave's event and my blog post if you haven't read it at the blog horticulture.com. The event is on April 6th. I think it's at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The form is linked in the blog post. I can even put it in the links in the thing here when I do the Zoom link. And if you do sign up, then be sure and respond to the automatic email that you will get from Dave asking for personal info, because he needs to know a little bit about you. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm going to post a couple of links, and then I'm going to go use the loo and then sign off. So here's the Zoom link. It won't be open just yet, but it will be open shortly. And just in the interest of maximizing potential of this meet, I will link to the Dave event here and to my blog post, which is called Ticket to Infinity. Right, I will be back next week at the same time, and if you want to give feedback or support me, I think you know the many ways.